Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Deuteronomy. Today we're primarily looking at Deuteronomy chapter 17. In this chapter, Moses begins to give the Israelites instructions upon the civil law once they establish themselves in the promised land. So once they are there, they're going to want a court system, a matter of judges, and they're also going to want some political leadership. And he addresses both of these things. Now, he starts talking about the legal system or the court system with a couple of verses in chapter 16, and then he continues it in chapter 17. So first we'll look at chapter 16, verses 18 and 19. Moses says, "Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes in every town that the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall judge the people fairly. Do not pervert justice or show partiality." And then verse 20. "Follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land that the Lord your God is giving you." So Moses tells them that after you establish yourself in the promised land, you must establish a court system with judges who are fair and impartial. This is because the Lord demands justice and justice alone. So appoint men who reverence and honor the Lord and will dispense justice properly with no favoritism and no partiality. Any society must have that kind of legal system if it is to be a good society. And this is certainly true for those who live under the authority of the Lord, as the Israelites were expected to do. Now, Moses says some more about this court system in chapter 17, because the question might arise, well, what if there's a case that is too difficult for the local judges to arbitrate? What if it's too hard for them? Where there was a higher judicial system, a Supreme Court, as it were. Notice in chapter 17, verses 8 and following. "Now, if cases come before your courts that are too difficult for you to judge, whether it be bloodshed or lawsuits or assaults, take them to the place the Lord your God will choose." In other words, go to the tabernacle, go to the temple, go to the place of worship. For it is truly the Lord who oversees all that is just. Go to the Levitical priest and to the judge who is in office at that time. Inquire of them, and they will give you the verdict. You must act according to the decisions they give you at the place the Lord will choose. Be careful to do everything they instruct you to do. So you had sort of a Supreme Court connected with the tabernacle or the temple, because it was under the authority of the Lord. You see, true justice always flows from the Lord our God. It comes out of worship, out of reverencing the Lord and following his ways. And so in Israel, the judicial system, the judges and the Supreme Court, which was connected to the temple, had to be based upon worship of the Lord, following the ways of the Lord. In that way, justice would be fair and impartial, the way the Lord intended it to be. So that's the judicial system. But also Moses deals with a political system that they would one day establish. He knows that the day will come in the promised land when they will want a king as their political leader. So in verses 14 and following, he talks about the appointment of a king, the political leader. Verse 14. "Now when you enter the land that the Lord your God has given you, and you have taken possession of it, you've settled in it, you may say, 'Let us set a king over us like all the nations around us.' Be sure to appoint over you a king that the Lord your God will choose." In other words, even when the day comes that you appoint a king, and that day will come, the king must be chosen by the Lord. The king is under the authority of the Lord. In truth, only God is your king. Only the Lord is truly your master. The king rules as a servant of the Lord, and so he must be appointed by the Lord. So don't just pick someone who's politically ambitious. You pick someone whom the Lord shows you is the right person to rule over you. And that's what it says about the king. Verse 18. "When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law," that's taken from the Levitical priest. "It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of this law and all of these decrees. He is not to consider himself better than his fellow Israelites and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel." In other words, the king is under the law of God. And when he is installed on his throne, make sure a copy of the law is with him, the Word of God. He is to read it every day, and he is to live under its authority. The king is not above the law of God. The king rules under the law of God and according to the law. Only the Lord is the true king. And your political leader, the king you appoint to sit on the throne, he reigns as a representative of God. So Moses was very careful to make sure that Israel, when they went into the new land, was to establish their civil society, both their court system and their political system, all under the authority of the Lord. Only the Lord is God, and all comes under him. Join us tomorrow as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Deuteronomy, and tomorrow we'll start looking at Deuteronomy chapter 18.